My name is David Plazas. I'm the opinion editor for the Tennessean, and I'm so glad that you could be here tonight. We welcome you here to this venue, the First Amendment Center, where we have this very important discussion tonight. See Something, Say Something was an idea that was conceived by the Tennessean, and due credit especially to Stacy Barchinger, who's our courts reporter here, and joined us just a few months ago. The purpose behind this was to have a serious discussion about sexual assault and about bystander training, and Stacy will speak more about that, as will the panelists. We invite you to listen to the panelists, but also to interact with them during these discussions, and of course, we'll have bystander training afterwards, which is a very special treat, I think, because in having discussions with many of the people here, it is so essential. Stacy herself is originally from Oregon and worked for the local publication there in her hometown for several years before joining Florida Today on the Space Coast. And we met actually in Fort Myers, which was my former publication, and we got, it was a reunion here at the Tennessean. So we're so happy to see her here. She covered the Vanderbilt rape trial, the trial of two former Vanderbilt football players for the 11 days that it was on, did video commentary and also wrote several stories. But she also went a step further. She had the live chats, and she also had some video commentaries that she did that were really essential at explaining what this all meant to the public. And beyond that, it was also about connecting with the community. As the press, it's not just our job to inform, to illuminate, to educate, but it really is to create solutions for the community, to challenge, to reflect, to lead, to develop this conversation and relationship that will make us a better place and a better Middle Tennessee. So without further ado, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your presence.
Sexual assault it really is an epidemic, not just in our community, but across the country. Anybody can be a victim, survivor, anybody can be an offender.
It doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter what your job is, it doesn't matter what school you go to. It's one of those unfortunate cases that can happen to anyone.
It is a society problem. It's in Brentwood, it's in Nashville, it's in the hills. So there's no place where we are sanitized from this issue being a part of our fabric.
With the recent high publicity that the ex-Vanderbilt players got when they went to trial, people tend to have the impression, well, that's what a rape looks like and that's how rapes are handled. And that was so unusual to have that high-profile case and to have it prosecuted. Most of the individuals that suffer from a sexual assault, people don't know it. It's not reported. They try to keep it private.
There's a culture of silence because sex is the weapon that's being used. So we really have to come out of this whole cloak of shame, fear, and silence.
Primary prevention is a multifaceted approach that we have to reach the children, that we have to also teach our teens, that we also have to teach our college-aged people, and we also have to teach adults so everyone knows what part that they play and how to respond.
Whether or not it is a high-profile case or the ones that we never hear, or the ones that go unreported, or the ones that people ignore or write off, it's still a victim at the root of it who is still going to feel isolated, devalued, dehumanized because of what has gone on.
Quite often when we think of bystander intervention, there's something taking place where the victim doesn't have control of the situation. That's when others have got to step forward and help out. They see something happening, they don't speak up about it. Part of it is because we haven't asked people to do that.
If we begin to shift our focus more towards protecting the person who is being victimized rather than the people who are doing the victimization, then I think we will begin to see this from a culture of kindness and respect.
What I would like to do is to ask our community to get involved, to do something to stop sexual violence. And the way we can do that is to say no. When you see a situation occurring, get involved. Stop it from happening before it's too late.
So kind of going off of what David said, we at the Tennessean, we really see this event as a way to continue our public service that started during the Vanderbilt trial, and here will continue today and in the future. This really is a reaction to the number of people that we saw in listening to trial testimony who had an opportunity to speak up and say something and prevent the rape from happening, or to change the course of events that happened in the months after. There were friends, other students at the university that saw the unconscious woman being carried into the dorm room that night. There were students that helped in a cover-up, and as we heard during the trial testimony, there was the roommate who rolled over in his bed and looked the other way and didn't report anything because he said he was uncomfortable and scared. We are here to try and change that and to help you all feel like you can speak up in a similar situation or in any situation. It's not just sexual assault crimes where bystanders can play a role. But you, of course, don't have to take that from me. We have some panelists here who will tell you, I think, the same thing. All right, so we're going to move into some questions. And I've asked these panelists here today because I really want them to just spread the word that it's not just Vanderbilt. It wasn't just this one case where bystanders play a role. So Sergeant Shreve, I'm going to ask you to start and just kind of tell us how many rapes are reported in Nashville or investigated every year, and are they always reported? Do you know about all of the crimes that occur?
Probably one of the most underreported crimes in this country, and probably in the world. I've got some raw numbers that I took from the last 3 years. Put my glasses on. But just in the past 3 years, this is what was reported to the police department, all that we investigated. In 2012, we investigated 545 rapes, and that includes adult and child sexual abuse, because our unit also investigates both the children and the adults. In 2013, we had 531, and in 2014, we had 607. So I really do attribute, I know that we took a dramatic increase in a couple of years, but I think the awareness has come out more, that it's been talked about more. It's not something that's just kept in-house, or it's a secret. I think back many years ago, I think that was one of the biggest issues, that most people just didn't want to talk about it. It was a self-secret, and it was just not talked about. I really encourage everyone to come forward and report as much as possible. We'd love to have everyone to report these crimes that we can get involved in and get an investigation started, but that's the raw numbers that we had in the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we hear is that, or at least that I have heard, I think, from each of you, is that victims are sometimes hesitant to come forward. Maybe, Glenn, could you talk a little bit about, do all of the cases, all of the rape cases that come into your office, do they all end up on national media, like the Vanderbilt case did?
Obviously, it's rare for a case to get the type of media attention that the Vanderbilt rape case did. When someone reports a rape, the very first thing that happens is a police officer comes out and interviews the victim and works with that victim to make sure that we can successfully prosecute that case. Depending on how old the allegation was, hopefully it's fairly prompt. They're taken to have a test done at the hospital and see if we can develop very important pieces of evidence through a rape kit that can help us with our prosecution of the case. Fairly quickly after that analysis, a warrant will issue, and the victim will need to come to court for a preliminary hearing within a short period of time after the report, and then we will do our best to try to make sure that the court appearances are as few as possible, but at the same time try to make sure that the case gets handled efficiently and within a reasonable amount of time. A trial would be had usually a year to a year and a half after the event. Most cases do not actually go to trial. Most cases get worked out on some sort of resolution that the victim gets a lot of input in. And our job is to make sure that the victim knows that they are fully supported by our office, that they have support systems throughout the community through a lot of the nonprofits that do a wonderful job working with folks and turning victims into survivors. Our job is to make sure that justice is done on every case, Our job is to make sure that people who are dangerous to the community are locked up in prison, and that way we know the community can be safe. And our job is also to make sure that we fully validate the victim, because this is such a dehumanizing experience. Rape is a crime of violence. It is not a crime of passion. It is a situation where someone has done an incredibly violent act. This is among the most serious crimes in the criminal code. We take it as such, and this is one of our primary functions as a district attorney's office, is to support victims and bring justice to this type of case.
Great. Okay. And Tony, switching over to what you see in schools, can you talk about what resources there are, and how to tell if maybe a child is a victim?
Well, I think, of course, all the primary resources come from law enforcement and other agencies that work with the school system. But in the school system, we employ social workers, behavior specialists, family involvement specialists, and many others that work directly with children and families. So if we are able to identify students that may be at risk, then we take the appropriate measures. Number one, of course, is reporting the suspicion to DCS, working with our Youth Services and Sex Crimes Division, but then internally to also make an immediate referral to our staff members so that they can also begin to provide the appropriate intervention for the children as well.
Okay, good. And then, Rachel, I know there have been some programs that have kind of overlapped between the SAC and the schools, but tell me, what does the SAC do, and tell me about if you see a typical victim.
Sure, thank you, Stacy. The Sexual Assault Center works with a little over 600 sexual assault survivors a year, from as young as 3 years old to the elderly. As we heard a little bit earlier, sexual assault knows no boundaries, so it does impact children, adults, teenagers, college-age students, and that is our primary program. We provide counseling, ongoing counseling and support to survivors and their family members. We do that over a long-term basis because, as we've also heard, sexual assault is a very dehumanizing crime. It causes a lot of shame, embarrassment, fear, and it is long-term therapy is involved in that recovery process. In addition to the counseling and support that we provide, we also work towards preventing this crime, and that's where we do a lot of work with Metro Nashville schools and other area schools and schools across the state to go in and work on primary prevention, stopping this crime before it ever happens. We have two programs. Safe at Last is for kindergartners through 6th grade, and the Be Empowered program for teenagers, and that is really teaching children about healthy relationships, respect, assertiveness skills, those basic skills that we need to decrease the potential of negative sexual acts, sexual aggression, and encourage children, even at a very early age, to identify safe people in their lives in case something bad does happen. And Stacey, there is not a typical victim. Victims are from, again, all places. It knows no boundaries, but most victims experience very similar symptoms: depression, anxiety, fear, isolation, but there's no common victim.
Mm-hmm. And hang on to that microphone one second. One more question for you. How many of the cases you see involve bystanders?
I would say the majority of the cases, if not all of them, involve bystanders. There are many cases involving children where there may be what we refer to as a non-offending parent. So maybe a parent or a caregiver who was not part of the abuse but is there to respond. And many parents respond appropriately and help children get support. And many parents try and push it under the rug and don't deal with it. That is one form of lack of bystander intervention. But then there are also cases similar to the Vanderbilt situation where a college-age student or a teenager is sexually assaulted and someone is vaguely aware or possibly aware of the event and doesn't feel capable or able to step forward and attempt to get help or seek help to help stop it.
Okay. And the other question, I'd love for all of you to answer this, so maybe we can just pass the mic back, but how do you talk to young people, or what do you say to young people about what they can do in these kinds of situations?
First of all, I think one of the first things we want to say is don't be afraid. This is a very, very hard, difficult conversation, but it pays off in the long run because you will be protecting someone and helping someone. And what we see about bystander patterns is that if one person steps forward, the likelihood that other people will step forward is hugely increased. So try to take a step. Just take that first step, and other people will typically follow.
Perfect.
Yeah, and very similar in the school setting. We ask our students to really be observant to what's taking place with their friends and family members, so that if they do suspect something, to then have the appropriate conversation with an adult in the building, so that then they can take the appropriate next steps. For students that we suspect have been offended, we always try and communicate that it is not their fault. There's nothing that was done, nothing that they had done to justify what had happened to them. So that way they view us as a resource, as an ally, and not someone that's going to be judging them, so that they will open up, so we will know the appropriate course of action to take.
In many situations, people see what is going on and they rationalize, well, maybe I didn't just see what I think I saw. Or maybe something good is going to happen out of this situation. Maybe somebody's just going to take someone who's unconscious back and nurse them to health over the next few hours. And the kind of the purpose of this forum is, if you see something, say something. And really, it's if you see something, recognize it for what it is. And even if your only response is to intervene to the point of asking questions, hey, is she all right? Hey, can I help? Hey, are you taking care of her? Hey, do I need to call for an ambulance? Hey, do I need to provide extra assistance? So many times, just that intervention alone will cause folks to adjust their behaviors in a way to where the person who is helpless or who is about to become a victim will actually not become a victim. It's incumbent upon all of us. As far as from a legal standpoint, it is rare that a bystander can be charged with a crime. There are times when a parent might know that their child's stepfather might be abusing them, and either know that it's abuse is happening or engaging in willful blindness, and then they might actually be committing a crime by not reporting it or not intervening. But in a general basis, if you were to see someone or a friend or somebody in your apartment or somebody in your dorm, and you see that about to happen, it might not be a crime, but it's really your responsibility as a citizen to look out for people that you run into, even if they're strangers, and be able to say, hey, what can I do? How can I participate, to the extent of how can I help this person and how can I intervene? Sometimes it just takes a word. Now, if you get in a situation where there's actual danger and you are fearful to intervene, well, there are plenty of ways to intervene where you don't personally do it. Pull out your cell phone, call 911, get a hold of, in a college campus, get a hold of the RA that's on duty, or just get others to go with you in their strength in numbers to essentially intervene. But what we've got to do is, we cannot have a society that just the default position is to look the other way, even when you know something is wrong and something terrible might be about to happen.
And I agree with everyone on this panel. I mean, that's one of the biggest mistakes that we see. It's people have that rationalization that it's not me, so it's none of my business. And it is their business. I mean, everybody can be the perfect witness and be the perfect person to come forward, because there may be little things that you may see or you may not be able to physically intervene, but you can get physical descriptions. You can get information that you can relate to the police. You can help the victim. You can make sure she gets medical attention. You can scream and yell. Maybe it'll take that person and push them away, that they'll take off running. Anything that you can do is going to help along the way, as far as keeping that victim safe and keeping her, just making sure that she's okay.